This is Bowser. While Bowser starts out as an awful character in Melee, he slowly becomes this in Project Plus.
Bowser wins a Project Plus National, baby!
But hold your horses, I know. Why is Bowser such an awful character in Melee, and what went wrong? For his time, Bowser was the most requested newcomer to be included in the next Smash game. Ironic because the character is very bad competitively. Getting out of the way the few positives that Bowser has, Bowser is a heavyweight character because of his weight, which means he can survive for a really long time. His smash attacks and aerials are actually really strong and hit hard despite some of them having a lot of startup and end lag. He has one of the best get up attacks at ledge, and also his up B out of shield is really good. Bowser has a horrible matchup spread, losing to a majority of the cast in the game, and that's because most of the characters can camp him or really just do anything to him and it just beats him. It's pretty lame. Bowser is currently ranked the worst character in the entire game. Reason 1 is Bowser is incredibly slow. This is one of the main factors that contributes to being a low tier, is usually how fast the character is. Bowser is extremely slow compared to the other characters in the cast. His jump squat frame is 8 frames long, being the only character in the game with a jump squat this slow. A whole 2 frames slower compared to the rest of the cast. This means every time he inputs a jump or does an aerial, Bowser's going to do it slower than every character in the game. So this contributes to him getting stuffed by other characters' moves. While it's clear that Bowser is trying to be the slow but powerful character archetype, this is really common in fighting games. However, Bowser is so slow to the point where he is clearly invalidated by every character in the game. Bowser has a slow wave dash, his attacks have a large amount of end lag and startup, his initial dash is one of the worst in the game. Bowser's extreme power sacrifices his overall speed, and this is one of the big reasons why he's a horrible character. Fire Breath is also tied with Zelda's Din Fire for possibly being one of the worst projectiles in the game with its high amount of startup and end lag. It also has short reach, gradual loss of power, and is almost completely useless outside of edge guarding almost linear recoveries. This move is probably a meme move in Bowser's moveset, and I mean just look at how fast it diminishes its flame. It's awful. Look at this move go, it's one of the worst moves in the game. His ability to use aerials is also really bad because again, his very slow jump squat and air speeds, and his high amounts of lag that are on his aerials. This leads to a horrible shuffle that is unironically easy to perform, and these deficiencies add up and give Bowser the worst neutral in the entire cast. All in all, this is why it's bad to be a slow character in Melee, you end up like Bowser. Reason 2. Outside of Bowser's poor neutral, he has a lot of other bad qualities, like his pretty horrible grab. His grab when missed leaves Bowser in a vulnerable state. On top of that, Bowser has slow rolls, a lackluster shield size. This leads to Bowser having so much trouble securing KOs because of his lack of options. He also has trouble taking stocks too because Bowser's low knockback moves, coupled with his really high amounts of end lag, makes it very shallow for him to try to combo opponents. It's because most of his combos require really precise timing and L canceling. And even that, these combos are incredibly limited to 2 to 3 hits, even at most. So if his opponent properly DIs, most of these later hits on these combos aren't really going to work. Bowser's slow speed on both the ground and the air also prevent him from easily pursuing foes that have been knocked back. His combo game is so bad that other opponents can simply just recover from the 1 or 2 hits that Bowser does and then just hit him back for even attempting to do a combo. This makes Bowser's punishes highly inconsistent even at the low levels of play. Reason 3. Bowser is such a large and heavy character. Now I did say this is one of the positives for Bowser, it's also one of his biggest negatives. Compared to the rest of the cast, Bowser, because of his weight, is incredibly easy to combo. His large character model also leads him to being hit by straight hits really easily, and he can just be straight up bullied by other characters in their really simple combos because he's such a big target. He doesn't have a lot of ways of getting out of these combos, and his already horrible speed and awful frame data doesn't really aid in the overall competitive balance of Bowser. While Bowser does have high endurance potential due to being the heaviest character in the game, it is offset by his terrible mobility, extreme susceptibility to getting comboed, and he's just slow, predictable, and easily gimpable. Combining all those negatives, Bowser also has a horrible and predictable recovery, which hinders his survivability tremendously. Despite the move being really good out of shield, It's not a good recovery move whatsoever. It only grants a decent amount of recovery potential horizontally, but has terrible vertical distance. This makes meteor spikes and just spiking Bowser in general offstage incredibly easy. Characters like Marth or Falco or even Fox's Shine can take him out really simply. Even at extremely low percents, Bowser can just be gimped and bullied offstage and then he won't be coming back. It's also hindered by his horrible airspeed, lack of alternative options to dealing with these spikes and recovery options. He's just not good at dealing with this stuff off stage. He's very simple to edgeguard. Despite all this though, Bowser has a small amount of positives. He is offset by a horrible amount of negatives and weaknesses that led to him being one of the worst characters in Melee of all time. What a bad character. And I'm sorry, I know with some of the characters, there's some diehard fans out there that really love the character or they want to see the character succeed. Bowser is the one character that I simply don't really see ever being competitively viable in Melee whatsoever. Bowser is a very deficient character with very few advantages and several crippling weaknesses. His survivability is greatly offset by his poor defensive game and ease of being comboed. His lack of safe moves outside of Whirling Fortress is really his only reliable move in his entire moveset, which is kinda sad. As such, he's rarely seen representation at all at any level of play due to the multitude of hard reads that Bowser players have to do to just do anything with the character, which is why Bowser is hardly played to this day. This isn't really an understatement where the difference between a low tier in Melee and a high tier in Melee is incredibly far apart. So Bowser is really a bad character compared to Fox, Falco, or Marth, for example. I'm glad to eat my words though. If one day in 20XX Bowser wins a Super Major, trust me, I will eat my socks. Until then though, he's a bad character. When Bowser was first introduced in Project M, he still had a way to go compared to where he is today. Still characteristic of his Melee and Brawl version, he's a slow character, very large and heavy. While still being buffed compared to the Melee and Brawl iterations, he still was near the bottom of the cast, even in the most later tier list for Project M 3.6. He was mostly seen as a bottom 2 character in the game. Even though he was incredibly buffed, still not good enough to compete with all the other characters that have been buffed as well. So he wasn't necessarily a bad character because the tier list is so close and competitive in PM, but he wasn't really seen a lot and was hardly even played. He had plenty of flaws like his awkward walk animations and laggy attacks. His recovery is still very weak vertically, while Bowser was heavily buffed given the large amount of armor that was given to his attacks, which means he won't get contended as easily by fast moves, which is actually a big problem with the character in Melee. This means Bowser can straight up use his armor to sponge attacks and hit opponents back. Bowser has damage buffs to a large amount of his attacks now, leading to him being able to take stocks very easily. His speed has been buffed in some areas, having a much better dash speed, and his initial jump squat has been reduced from 8 frames to 6. His character model is larger than what it was in Brawl, which does make him more vulnerable to attacks, but it also makes his reach incredibly better, making Bowser much more of a menacing character. Bowser has much more depth to his attacks. His Koopa Claw side B now has a new iteration of the attack that can spike opponents off stage, which is actually incredibly hype. Bowser's bomb, his down B, can be cancelled and followed into an aerial, which is actually kind of cool. His smash attacks are super difficult to deal with compared to what they were in Melee. They have a lot of lingering hitboxes on them and they're really deadly. They can actually KO incredibly early, so don't mess with these attacks. But here's the catch. He still has the same weaknesses from Melee and Brawl that Bowser had in the previous iterations of the character. He still can be camped, he gets comboed very hard. His recovery is still considered very lackluster, but wait, hold up. This is the saving grace of the Bowser character. This changed the character tremendously. PM to P+. Now, Bowser in PM to P+ is the single greatest glow-up any character has had in P+, and the changes Bowser has received sent him from being arguably the worst character even in PM to being an actual character that can win a Project Plus major, which is crazy to think about. His previous low-tier placement doesn't even seem to be the case anymore. While not a broken character by any means, he still has weaknesses, but he has received a lot of buffs that change the character significantly. First off, Bowser received a projectile, which, yes, say goodbye to Fire Breath. Bowser now has a decent projectile that is pretty strong, but it needs to be charged every 13 seconds. His dash animation was completely changed, which actually changes the character completely, because now his awkward run has been replaced with a much smoother and faster run animation. This allows him to pretty much do anything on the ground quicker. Overall, his speed has been slightly increased across the board, which greatly benefited the character overall. You could say he's the most buffed character in P+, and this has affected the character significantly. For where Bowser started in Melee, he has certainly come a long way. Being the worst character in Melee to being a bad character in Brawl as well, and being pretty subpar in Project M 3.6. Some would say Bowser was an underrated character and simply was overbuffed considering he's now capable of winning a Super Major. Other people think Bowser is fine and he deserved the buffs because the character was so bad for so long. Either way, Bowser has certainly been given a grand glow up in Project Plus, so if you enjoy playing the character in Melee, you might actually like him a lot in P+, so check that out. He is arguably a high tier character now, which is crazy to think about from where he started. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I stream during the weekend, so if you guys want to come through on those weekend streams, come through on those. Also check out the subreddit down below if you guys want to join the subreddit, if you have clips you want to include or whatever. Also, I have a Patreon down below if you guys want to get content early. Shout out to all my patrons. Alright guys, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Peace!